Before the subsequent ranting and raving about a children's film, I need to establish something. I grew up in a family that adored stock car racing. My father was a season ticket holder at Bristol Motor Speedway for much of my adolescence. My brother is one of the biggest Casey Kane fans you can find. And I'm pretty sure my mom had the hots for Jeff Gordon even when his facial hair looked like that. Ugh. Bouncing off the walls is my favorite driver, Takuma Sato, won the Indy 500 for the first time, and finally getting to visit the World Center of Racing are some of the best memories of my childhood. They mean a lot to me, and I'll not soon forget them. Even though that fandom has faded over the years, I still recall with feverish excitement going to the local movie theater for my birthday in the summer of 2006 for the release of Cars. The subsequent sequels would, of course, never eclipse that initial high, but in the years since, I've gained a new appreciation for the series, which is unfortunately something too many of you have not done. So here's my hot take. The Cars series is not anywhere near as awful as people make it out to be. First of all, Cars takes the otherwise foggy elements that constitute true Americana and places them at the forefront of its story. It should not come as a surprise that we are a big car country. For much of the 20th century, one of the biggest sports in the United States was stock car racing. Whether it was NASCAR, IndyCar, drag racing, dirt racing, you name it. While viewership numbers for those events have dwindled in recent years, customizing your ride or fixing up grandpa's old station wagon are still defining moments in the lives of millions of Americans. More importantly, the values of freedom encompassed in 4 wheels and a seat, as well as the artistry of building anything with only the sweat off your brow and a little elbow grease to guide you, are the founding principles of this country. Furthermore, Cars is a love letter to small-town America, and whether you like it or not, those little municipalities on the fringes of old US highways define the US. The loss of vibrancy in the heartland is another unfortunate reality of American life that has impacted plenty of people. No matter if you grew up in a Midwestern town that has one foot in the grave like me, witnessed the decline of your local community thanks to industrialization like my father did, or just hope to one day escape to the countryside from the bright lights of a metropolitan powerhouse. Those themes are central to the plot of Cars and showcase how much these oft-forgotten corners of our country still have to give. And if you find that plot boring, well, that's kind of the point. Nothing bombastic or earth-shattering usually happens in these real towns with real people living in them. Sorry. But that slow and mundane way of life is meant to show that the problems these people, or in this case, cars, face are legitimate and we should care about their erasure. Secondly, the animation is stellar and consistently improves over the whole series. Every artistic component of this trilogy is marvelous, from the rusty and dusty look of the American West in the original, to the detailed neon idiosyncrasies of the sequel, to the incredibly photorealistic CGI of the final film. Additionally, the departure from detailing typical anthropomorphic models to animating emotion and expression into automobiles is next to impossible. Rendering these characters meant sewing truth into every material on screen. Cars needed to feel heavy. Glass and steel needed to look like their real-life counterparts. Up to this point, the team at Pixar never had such a difficult challenge, and they handled it with style and grace time and time again. Finally, and possibly the biggest slight against these films, is the argument that it was all done to make revenue on the eventual toy sales. I will admit that Pixar playing into the heavy-handed merchandising of other Disney properties is kinda disgusting, considering how honest and heartfelt their narratives tend to be in comparison. But did we all just forget about the first movie the studio ever put out? Toy Story, a movie that screams mass capitalist market value from the title alone. Of course, when critiquing the plot of that triumvirate and its stapled-on fourth picture, nobody bats an eye. But my brother and I receive mountains of incredibly detailed die-cast cars for Christmas every year over the course of our childhood, and somehow everyone just loses their minds. Unlike most of Disney's plastic and fabric bargain bin schlock, these were cool collector's items that featured almost every character in the series. What other animated universe can host that much variety? And as a kid dragged to multiple NASCAR races for years, you know those models were much more fun to play with than the dinky 1/64 scales that you could buy from the trailers at tracks. I recognize that not everyone that watches Cars or its sequels is coming from the same background as me, and therefore their life experiences probably did not have that much of an impact on their reception of the film. but you cannot deny that the effort Pixar put into the series matches and, in some instances, far exceeds their other projects. Come on, show me one person who actually enjoyed The Good Dinosaur for anything other than the visuals. Much like its setting, Cars should not be forgotten as lackluster, but remembered as an excellent portrayal of Middle America and a testament to the might of Pixar's artists and animators. With that being said, Cars 2 is awful. Thank you and good night. Whew. Sheesh. I'm a nerd for cars. Not actually, do not quote me on that. I did not say that. I am not a nerd for cars. Let me make that very clear.